Hi, everyone. Welcome to the EO Wonder podcast. I am live in studio with Matthew Pollard. He's originally from Melbourne, Australia, and is one of the top rated speakers in EO chapters. And I think it was my friend Trent, who is also an EO member, that recommended me to Matthew. So I always love talking to entrepreneurs in person. Welcome to LA, Matthew.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I know we have had some fun with our schedules to make this work, and I'm so glad we could do this live in studio.
And so you're known for the rapid growth guy, as the rapid growth guy.
Mhm.
And you also have this book called The Introverts Edge, which has sold over 120,000 copies in 17 languages. Tell us about how can we, one, get an edge, and why do introverts sell more than extroverts?
It's a great question. I think that one of the things that most people believe is that introverts don't have this gregarious, they're not naturally gregarious. They don't have the gift of gab. And because of that, they can't sell, they can't network. They're not the best public speakers. They're not great on podcast interviews. And first thing, I believe that that's absolute rubbish. I think that for the average introvert, we're not as natural at those things. And especially if we're trying to behave extroverted, then, that's a recipe for disaster. And we'll end up going home and ruminating, why did I say that thing? And I think that happens in networking as well, especially if we do that transactional elevator pitch, which I can't stand. But I think that the reason why introverts do better than extroverts is because we're terrible at it, we tend to gravitate more to systems and processes. And so an introvert with a great system or process, and of course that takes believing that they can sell, otherwise they don't put the effort in. I believe that they'll actually outsell their extroverted counterparts hands down. Now, that's not to say that an extrovert can't learn a system, but they tend to love selling basically by the seat of their pants. And that means that their sales look more like a roller coaster ride. When they're having a great day, their sales are great. When they're having a bad day, their sales are bad. And anything that happens in their personal life can affect their ability to sell. So what I find is originally an introvert that gravitates to a sales process tends to do really well quickly. But then because they hold on to it and they're constantly iterating it and they turn that rumination into continuous improvement, right? What one thing can I change? What one thing can I improve? Then all of a sudden they start to do so much better. And it goes from over the course of a week to a month, they're outselling an extrovert, to pretty much every day they're outselling an extrovert. And by the way, for the extroverts that are listening, the truth of it is that sales systems work for everyone. And if you ever want to sell your business and you're the only salesperson or the primary salesperson in your business, you don't have a business that you can actually sell. So you owe it to yourself to create a sales system. And then you want to teach it to others. And you've got to look, do I want to hire an extrovert? Do I want to hire an introvert? Well, if you want them to follow a system that you can almost look at the numbers and say, we've got this many appointments, we've got this many days in the month, and have predictability to the amount of revenue, then you really want somebody to follow a system, whether they're introverted or extroverted. And when you're hiring, you have a tendency to go with the person that has that more gregarious personality, but then they don't follow the system as easily. So you want to make sure that when you're talking to an extrovert, you make sure that they're aware that there's a sales system that you hope that they follow and expect them to follow. And then with an introvert, you let them know, because then they'll be ecstatic to find that out. And I just think that it's one of the biggest drivers. Introverts just hold true to it. And, I learned this the hard way. I had a reading speed of a sixth grader in late high school. I was super introverted. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I literally fell into sales only because I lost my job before Christmas and had to go and find whatever I could get. And I fell into commission-only sales.
Wow. So you had your personal experience with being an introvert and also building five, is it multi-million-dollar businesses before you were the age of 30? Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right. So for me, it's funny how it happened. I I had massive reading issues. I was misdiagnosed as dyslexic, but I had what was called scotomic sensitivity syndrome, or Irlen syndrome, which basically meant I put on a funny pair of colored lenses and miraculously I could learn to read. I couldn't read like everybody else, but I had to start the process of reading. And so for the last 2 years of high school, it was really rough. I had to really hustle to get, and I got into the top 20% of my state, which was great. But the thing was that I was exhausted. My family knew that I had no idea what I wanted to do, and they just knew I wouldn't stick it out in college unless I knew. And we just all agreed that I was going to take a year off to find myself. And so I took a job at a real estate agency, funnily enough. And before people think that I was the person naturally going to be out selling, I wasn't. I was in the back office doing data entry. Pretty much, I'm certain that I had a look on my face like, don't speak to me. I'm here to find myself. But 3 weeks into that job, my manager pulls me aside. He's like, Matt, I'm so sorry. We're closing down this office. You're out of work. And for those people, I know you said you had a global audience here that are in the Southern Hemisphere. They'll know that. For the people in the US that are listening, some of you may not know that it's the summer season is at Christmas time in Australia. So most Australians will go on holidays on the 20th of December and they don't come back until the 15th to 20th of January. And if you're a business owner that your spouse has been telling you for about a month, do not take on anybody, do not do anything that's going to stop you from focusing on your kids during the holiday season. And so no one's hiring. The only jobs I could find were commission-only sales. So there were 2 jobs in the paper, and the only thing that was scarier than calling both of those was going home to my father, who broke his back 80 hours a week, and telling him I was out of work. But, I mean, I always felt like the slow kid. I had really bad acne. Now I've got these glasses. I was like, "Oh, this is terrible." So I applied for both jobs, and I got 2 job interviews. And then I went to both interviews and I got 2 job offers, and I'm like, "Ooh, maybe they see something in what I don't see in myself," right? And so I accepted a job doing business to business telecommunications sales, and I went in with a little bit of quiet confidence the first day, and the manager and the trainer put that to bed really quickly. They're like, "Matt, we just hire everyone. Like, we've got this saying, we just throw mud up against the wall, we see what sticks," which I guess is a fun saying until you realize you're the mud. So after 5 days product training and not a single second of sales training, I get thrown on this road. I still remember it's Sydney Road in Melbourne, Australia, hundreds of doors on each side, which if you're going to get to a point where you're going to get told no and get kicked out, like, why not have not far to walk, right? So I went into the first door, and just before I walked in, I went, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to say." Like, I've been taught about the product, but nothing about how to sell. So I took a deep breath, I walked in, and I was politely told to leave. And I say politely and luckily together, because after that, I was less politely told to leave. Then I was sworn at, then I was told to get a real job. And I mean, this was the only job I could get. So door after door after door, I just kept going. And I got sworn at again. I got told to get a real job until I got to my 93rd door and I made my first sale. And I remember I made about $70 and I was ecstatic. I was working at McDonald's back then, like, in my part-time around work, around school. So because of that, I was like, wow, okay, I've made $70. This is great. Oh, wait, I got to do this again tomorrow and the next day and the next. And the whole idea of that was not okay. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? I can't go home and tell my dad I quit. And that was I think I made the realization at that point that really changed my life. I decided sales had to be a system. And I basically said to myself, well, how am I going to learn this system? I couldn't pick up a Brian Tracy or a Zig Ziglar book. It would have taken me a year to read that, let alone apply it. But I was lucky enough to decide that sales was a system and maybe I could find the system on YouTube. So I typed in sales system and all these videos came up. And I just literally spent 8 hours a day perfecting what I'd learned the night before or working on the next step. And then I'd go home and I'd look at the next thing for 8 hours. Weekends, I'd spend 16 hours practicing. And for the people listening, don't worry, I'm not suggesting you do this. There's smarter ways to do it now. But every day I got better. Like soon it was, 71 doors, then 48, then 26, and then 18, and then 9. And eventually I got it down to making a sale every 3 doors. About 6 weeks in, my manager pulls me aside and he had that face on him. I was like, am I going to get fired again? And for the people listening, I was the quiet person. I handed my paperwork in downstairs. I didn't really talk to the boisterous salespeople upstairs. And he looks at me and he's like, Matt, we just got our national sales figures. And it turns out you're the number one salesperson in the company. Now, this was the largest sales and marketing company in the Southern Hemisphere, over 1,000 salespeople. And I was the number one. So he looks at me and he says, Matt, you can sell. I bet you can manage. I have no idea why people think that. I told him I had no clue. He's like, we'll give you 20 people, butt up against the wall, see what sticks. Well, long story short, everybody quit within 24 hours. But I went back to YouTube to learn how to manage. I then learned that, got promoted 7 times in the space of 12 months. Right about that time, I started up my own business. And yeah, fast forward just shy of a decade, I was responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar success stories.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds so phenomenal as an introvert, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me, and I think what was really important, is I went from scared to sell to teaching hundreds how to do it. Now, through the books, I get the opportunity to teach tens of thousands, which is great. But I think the biggest thing that I learned is there isn't a single system that you can't learn as an introvert. And The other thing that I learned is if you're an introvert, you've got different strengths and different weaknesses than an extrovert. Like some might say an extrovert isn't the best listener. They're not the most empathetic. But if they work for a big organization, then somebody will say, well, you should go and get emotional intelligence education. This stuff's coachable. If you're an introvert and you can't sell or you can't, or you're not naturally gregarious, no one says, hey, you can do this. They're like, oh, poor Sarah or poor Johnny, they're an introvert. They can't sell. They can't network. That's just the way their life's going to be. And so people look at us like we're, second class citizens. So a lot of times we consider ourselves as second class citizens. And the truth is we're not. Our path to success is just different. I mean, I proved that we can network. I mean, I moved from from Australia, where I had spent a lifetime awkwardly fostering a network, to the United States, and went from having, no network to being one of the most connected people in Austin within the space of 12 months. I was invited to events because I was one of the most connected people. I won proclamations of thanks from the governor's office and the city of Austin. And yet 12 months before that, I knew no one. And I think what I really learned is that there was always a strategy, always a system. And what it really took was me taking responsibility, not blaming anyone else. I mean, my manager told me to quit on my first day, and I didn't listen. And I could have blamed the fact that I didn't have gift of gab. I could have blamed my manager. Instead, I took personal responsibility. I didn't wait for someone to teach me. I said, what if there was a way? And I then crammed on YouTube. And sure, there are smarter ways to do this now. And, but I put good and hard work behind it. And I mean, it took 6 weeks, and I didn't go from having no business being in sales to surviving. I went from no business being in sales to the best in the company. Imagine for a lot of the small business owners or the wannabe small business owners or that are listening, you owe it to yourself to whatever that one thing is. And this is what I talk about all the time. Like, find one thing. Don't say, I'm going to learn these 12 things. I'm speaking I spoke at the EO Entrepreneurship Rally a few months ago. And literally, as soon as I got off stage, they were like, we want you back in a few months. So I'm now going back to do a different presentation. And part of that is, as entrepreneurs, we focus on so many things. Well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. To me, it's in a lot of ways come across as busy procrastination, because we don't do all of it well. We say, I've got to learn all these additional skills. And then we're like, oh, I still don't know enough. I still don't know enough. And then we just get back to doing what we always do and tell ourselves that we've got to catch up on work. We never actually do. Move our business forward. We just stay at the status quo. So I think for me, it's really take responsibility, live in what I'm thinking, and then be willing to do the work. And then what I've learned since then is if you have a great strategy, it doesn't need to be as much work. I'm not suggesting to the people that are listening that they need to spend 8 hours every night practicing a certain step in a process. But what they do need to do is make a decision that they're going to focus on one specific thing. They're going to nail it. And it's so quick to go from having no business doing it to be very good at it. And then to become the best, it's actually not that much harder because people don't put in the effort that they should.
Yeah, Epictetus also was very similar. He said, anyone who puts anything off is really that's man's downfall.
Absolutely. I think that for a lot of us, I think that really comes down to, and I don't want to, do I want to talk about goal setting? I think that most people set these big audacious goals, and they're not goals as much as they are wishes, because they know they're not going to put any effort behind them, and they haven't hit goals for the longest time. So one of the exercises, I have a podcast called The Introvert's Edge. So for people that are introverted that don't believe they can do a lot of these great things, the truth is there's introverts everywhere. And, I mean, if you think you can't do small talk, Oprah Winfrey and David Letterman, they're both introverted. If you think you can't sell, well, Zig Ziglar is an introvert. I'm listed on the top 30 list of global sales professionals, and I'm introverted. I know there's a ton of other introverts on that list. If you think you can't be quick and witty, I mean, Bill Murray, the guy that was on Groundhog Day, is an introvert. So it's definitely possible. But if we talk about goal setting, there's a podcast I have called The Better Business Coach, and please forgive me, I look about 12 years old in the video podcast in that one. I literally had just come to the United States. I promise you, I was 30 when I recorded them. But it talks about forget about goals, why is the key to success. But one of the things I talk about all the time is because we set these massive audacious goals, we stop even focusing on them. And we also we don't believe we can obtain them. So one of the things that I suggest is always saying, well, what are the three major business goals I have? What are the three personal goals? One, selfish to myself, because the truth is a lot of people don't think about themselves at all. And especially in a lot of religious regions, definitely don't. They feel like that's a bad thing. And the fact is you have to be a little bit selfish. They're your goals. But then also when you think about business, you have to think about yourself as well. But then what I get people to do is summarize each goal in 250 words or less, why, including why it's important to them, and connect passion, mission, driving why to it. And it's not just about you. You could have done anything. You chose to do this because you're passionate about providing an outcome to somebody else. And what I find quite often is that people set these goals. In 5 years, I'm going to do this. In 7 years, I'm going to do this. I'm like, when was the last time you ever hit a goal? You've just, you've been at $3 million for the last 6 years. And, well, maybe you've been at $1 million. A lot of people to be a member of EO want to hit that $1 million mark. And then I'm like, but you're making less than $100,000 profit. So we need to fix that. But their confidence of obtaining that goal is pretty beaten up. So a lot of what I end up doing is saying, let's focus on a really short-term goal we can knock out of the park. And we'll focus on a series of those. And once we start knocking them out, we can start to push the goals to be larger, and we can start to push them out further. And what happens is we start to build what I would say is self-efficacy towards goal obtainment. So the thing for me is, when I set myself a task and I say I'm going to obtain a goal and somebody else says to me, you're not going to obtain that. Well, the truth is my brain now can point to a direct time where I did attain an audacious goal. And I can point to a micro goal that I obtained and then and the baby steps to hitting these really audacious goals. As a matter of fact, I hit audacious goals far faster than most people hit regular goals. And so I'm bulletproof when somebody tries to affect my mindset, which also means my mindset's really strong. Because what happens is you set a goal and you're like, well, I've set this 6-year goal and I'll worry about it in 5 years' time. Well, of course it's not going to happen. And then somebody else says, oh, you should do something else. You're like, oh, shiny object, let's run towards that. So a lot of times people step away from what they should be doing. And that usually leads to, a lot of the people that I meet constantly in business, they may have high revenues, but they're constantly in this cycle of struggling to find interested people, trying to set themselves apart, trying to make the sale, and fighting on price. And they're so worried about any customer's a good customer to them that they're constantly trying to convince and cajole people. And for the average introvert, they've got to a point where they've maxed out their Rolodex and now they can't get anybody to see their value. And for the average extrovert, they spend their time constantly trying to explain what they do. And the person's overwhelmed. And because of that, they say, oh, send me a proposal or let me think about it. So nobody wins if you don't spend time taking a step back to work on your business. I think it was Abraham Lincoln that said, if I get given 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe.
Max.
And I mean, what most businesses do is just akin to just keeping on chopping. And if you said sharpen the axe, they'd be like, which 12 axes should I focus on? And I'm trying to create this massive axe that I'm going to launch in 10 years' time. And it's like, no, let's just focus on micro baby steps. Let's focus on transitioning the direction with momentum forward, and then let's knock those out of the park and then pick one axe first and then another axe and then another axe. And then next thing you know, you're massively hitting these audacious goals and they don't even feel that big to you.
Yeah, it reminds me of the SMART, goals, right? Specific, attainable, realistic, right? So measurable as well, and time sensitive. So that's exactly what you're saying. It has to be realistic.
Absolutely. And I think that what's interesting is that, oh, well, in 10 years, it's going to be realistic. Actually, I can give you an example. I worked with it was a ghostwriter, and his biggest issue was like, I don't know why everybody sets $1 million goal. Like, I feel like this is part of our programming, right? We inherit goals a lot of times from our mother, our father, our drunk roommate we had in college. We hear this saying, yes, I'm going to charge after it. And a lot of times we don't think it through. And a lot of times this $1 million goal is one of those. And people are like, oh, I'm going to have $1 million revenue business. I'm like, let me ask you a question. If you could have a $500,000 revenue business with $450,000 profit, or $1 million revenue with a $200,000 profit, which one would you take? And they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. I'd take the higher profit business. I'm like, okay. I always want people to think about profit. So I always get people to set profit-focused goals. But a lot of times I set people up and I'll say, I do suggest SMART goals. SMART goals is a great way of doing it. But when you say specific, they can say $1 million or $5 or $100 million in 10 years' time-based, and now it's measurable, right? So that works. And I'm like, okay, but you earned $27,000 last year and you made 12,000 this year and it's October. So firstly, do you believe that you're going do you even know what it would be like to spend $1,000,000 in, well, let's assume it's profit. And the truth is you find out very quickly that the pain's not worth the gain because they don't even know how to imagine spending that. Now, some people listening might say, "Well, I know how to spend $1,000,000," and that's great. Most people that are making 40,000 have no clue what $1,000,000 would be able to buy them. And usually will spend their entire life head down working towards that million because they never put their head out to work out whether or not there's a faster, smarter way to do it. So Derek, when he came to me, he was like, people can't afford what I do. He was selling ghostwriting services for $20,000. And I said, that's ridiculous. Like the industry average is 40 to 50,000. Like people can afford 20. He's like, well, it's not working for me. And I said, well, let me have a look at what you're doing in the sales process. And we discussed it for a little while. And I said to him, I'm struggling with this because the way let me ask you, what do you think your clients don't like doing? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, bear with me. Like, what do you think your clients don't like doing? And he said, well, writing. I said, how are you communicating with your clients? And what I noticed is that he'd been responding with his clients with these ridiculously long emails. And the truth was that as soon as he changed the way he communicated with his clients and started getting on the phone and saying, well, we wrote this email that said, I'm so glad. Thank you so much for your inquiry. I actually finished working with an author just like you. And, we got an amazing result. And it really does come down to the author and the ghost relationship, though. So I'd love to get on a call, discover a little bit more about you, and then I can talk about pricing because I have some questions to ask. Would you, schedule a call? And then we taught him a sales process and he was able to do that. But originally, when we were looking at this, he had $27,000 the year before, 12,000 this year. He had $1,000,000 target. And I said, what would success look like for you? And he said, well, success for me, if I thought about it, like if I was to think about what I call an independence goal, what does it mean where you're not living on champagne and caviar, but you're not living on bread or gruel either? And for his number, it was about 50, 60,000. Well, we put his prices up to $40,000 because I was like, it's got nothing to do with the price. It's got to do with the way you're selling. I don't care if you're $12 on Craigslist. You're talking to someone that doesn't like writing and you're making them write these ridiculously long emails. You're writing emails, he's responding on emails, or she's responding on emails. It's ridiculous. So we put the price up to 40,000 and we changed the way his sales script worked and introduced storytelling instead of education. And he literally closed his first sale within the space of 2 weeks. Now he's made 40,000. Within 6 weeks, he'd made 80,000. By the end of the year, he made about 120. But I said to him, do you still want $1,000,000 in revenue? And he said, oh gosh, no. He said, the fact of the matter is that, the way he'd planned it was he was going to have 10 writers working on his team. Each one of them would do 10 books. They'd charge 20,000 each. He'd make 10,000. They'd make 10,000. They'd make 100,000. He'd make 100 off them times 10 staff, $1,000,000. He doesn't want to have 10 staff. He's an introvert that wanted to just have a rapid growth business doing what he loves in a family environment where he didn't have to work that hard. And so I said, well, what do you want? And his next statement was, well, you know what? What I would prefer to have is a little regional, like little bookstore where I write in the back and we run events for, people that want to have events at in the community. Okay, sounds great. Well, what do you want to do for your next goal? Well, I'm going to hit this profit goal. And once I hit that profit goal, I'm going to have the bookstore. And I said, okay, great. So we put his price up to 50,000. The next year, he made 300,000. And I said, do you still want the bookstore? Oh, gosh, no. I'm getting the opportunity to work with amazing authors in Switzerland and London. Like, why would I want to, tether myself to a city? See, what happens is, oh, by the way, he now charges $120,000 to do a ghostwritten book, and he's booked out till next year, right? So it had nothing to do with price. But here's what would have happened. Imagine that he started to sell it at 10,000 or 20,000, and he managed to solve it. He would have started hiring all these staff, and he would have been head down. He would have hit the $1,000,000 target eventually, maybe, if he wasn't sitting down playing Candy Crush because he didn't believe it was possible. And he would have been miserable. So the great thing I love about micro goals is it forces you to put your head up and say, do I actually want this? I've hit this target, but do I want it? Do I want to keep pursuing? And the second thing that I love, because especially when I started this business, I couldn't have even imagined what was possible. And because of that, I didn't understand, like, all of the businesses that I built beforehand were bricks and mortar, telemarketing, direct sales. And when I built this one, I went, well, if I want to visit my family in Australia all the time, I need to have an online business. And so what I didn't even believe, like, I haven't even made my first dollar online. So the efficacy goal was to make my first sale completely through online, and then to make my next 10, and then to double my profit off those next 10. And by setting these micro goals, next thing you know, I'm flying past people that have been in business for 10 years because I'm thinking differently. So a micro goal forces you to A, reassess, but two, work out if there's a smarter way of doing something. Because as you start to make more money, the pain often isn't worth the gain for some of the, you're not willing to give up a weekend with your family for another client. So you need to think of how to maximize your time and then how to leverage yourself more effectively. So that's what I love about micro goal setting. And I think especially it's harder for people to hit big audacious goals or even small goals if their business is fighting on price. But once you're not fighting on price, you can set these different goals, knock them out of the park and catapult forward.
I just came from Stanford and took a digital transformation in the age of AI course. And one of the two words that I remember so distinctly is strategic reflection. And if you're doing strategic reflection in a shorter amount of time, you can really, and I hate the word pivot, but change. And I think what's also really important about what you're saying is that you really need to have your own personal point of view rather having society tell you, yes, you need $1 million. Yes, you need this type of bookstore. You start reflecting that this is this is what I don't want anymore.
Mm. I think that's really interesting, and I think that's a great segue into how to message yourself differently. Because one of the things that I find all the time is people it's like we're a herd-natured people, right? So because of that, we wanna say, like in Derek's case, I wanna say I'm a ghost rider, and I wanna feel like I'm part of a club or a community, and, and people join the O because they wanna be part of a community, and a lot of times that means we need to accept, we feel like we need to accept their advice or opinions, and I'm a big believer on trying on everything. Like, I never say no. I'm like, "Oh, that's a really interesting idea. Let's explore that." I'm willing to try on everything. That doesn't mean I need to wear it. It doesn't mean I need to take it out of the store. And I think that, when it comes to the reason why people are fighting on price, and I'm a big believer on if you start with sales, you've already lost. And I think that that's the other thing that I find is that people inherit not only their goals, but they inherit the way everybody does what they do in their industry. And if they start to segue out of that, people are, oh, careful, you need to look after that. And I'll give you an example. I worked with a language coach out of California, and she taught kids and adults Mandarin, right? She charged $50 to $80 an hour, and she'd been successful at it for about a decade. And then all of a sudden, she is dealing with new people moving into California actually that want to charge $30 to $40 an hour for private consultation. So she's struggling to keep her current clients. She's struggling to get new clients. And then she's like, but on top of that, I've got to deal with the fact there's people in China, thanks to this global economy we live in, offering to do it for $12 an hour. And as you said, there's AI now that can teach you. And on top of that, there's people in Silicon Valley that has created technology. I'll teach you Mandarin, you teach me English. We just won't charge anyone anything. So she comes to me and she's asking for sales advice. Now, I'm sure she had her audacious goals to grow her business, not survive. And on top of that, while I believe everybody can benefit from a sales system, I believed that for her and every business, that if you start with sales, you've lost. So I said, well, why don't we try to avoid the battle altogether? So what I looked at is all the clients she'd worked with over the years. And I said, of all of them, there were two people specifically that she helped with more than just language tuition. These were executives being relocated to China. And I mean, she helped them understand the difference between e-commerce in China and the Western world, how to handle a business card, why it matters so much, why you've got to reduce your accent, not just learn the language, the difference in rapport. Like for those people that have been, then they'll probably know this. But, if I'm in the Western world and I'm trying to sell something to someone and I'm terrible at sales, at the end of 45 minutes, I might say something horrible like, do you want to move forward? And somebody would respond with yes, no, or everyone's favorite. Let me think about it. Well, a week from now, if they still say they want to think about it, I know I'm probably not going to get that sale. Yet in China, they want to meet with you 5 or 6 times before they even discuss business. Gosh, they probably want to see you drunk over karaoke once or twice.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
I
They
mean,
wanna at least have tea with you.
yeah, I mean, there's a reason for that though. Like they want to know the character of the person because for them, they're not usually talking transactional or 12-month deals. They're talking 20-year contracts, at least 5 to 10. So they want to know who they're doing business with. And so I was like, when are you doing so much more for these people than just language tuition? What are you doing? And she's like, mean, they're just a few things. I'm just trying to help. And I'm like, you're stuck in your functional skill. And by the way, for the people listening, I want you to know you're all doing extra above and beyond things for your customers well. Because there is no way that anybody, if you've ever got a referral or a testimonial, there's no way that would have happened unless you did. Because no one says, oh, I want to introduce you to my friend Mark. I think he'd be an amazing service provider for you because he does everything everybody else does exactly. I mean, people wouldn't even stay as a current client because they'd always just go to someone cheaper. And I was like, Wendy, look, you're stuck in your functional skill. Is it fair to assume, as a result of the assistance that you're giving these people, they're going to be more successful in China? I mean, that's the point, right? And so she's like, well, I mean, yeah. And I'm like, great. Well, then why don't we call you the China Success Coach? Forget about Mandarin education for a second. Let's focus on what we ended up calling the China Success Intensive, which was a 5-week program that worked with the executive, the spouse, and any children being relocated to China. Now, she loved the idea of this, but she's like, well, who do I sell it to? I'm like, well, who do you think? And she's like, well, obviously the executive, which makes sense. I mean, I was terrified moving from Australia to the United States. Imagine going somewhere they speak a foreign language. I just don't think it's your ideal client. And she said, well, obviously it's the company. They got millions of dollars riding on it. So usually they'd be the one that would pay. I'm like, yeah, I get that. I still don't think so. Now she's frustrated with me. She's like, well, who then? I said, I think your ideal client is the immigration attorney. Now she looks at me like I'm speaking a foreign language. I'm like, think about it. They get paid 5,000 to 7,000 for doing a visa. All the bureaucracy and the paperwork that comes with that. They've got staff to pay for, rent to pay for. They've got to get the customer in the first place, which costs money. They'd be lucky to make $3,000. I'm like, just offer them $3,000 for a simple introduction that results in a sale to the China Success Coach. So instead of going out and looking for executives and networking to meet them, she went out looking for attorneys. And they loved the idea. They're like, double my profit for a simple introduction. What have I got to say? And she just had them say, congratulations, you've now got your visa. I just want to double check you're as ready as possible to be relocated to China. And I mean, you've got an overconfident executive. I think we're fine. We got a place sorted. We're learning the language. Kids are getting pretty good at it too. We got our visa now. Thank you. I think we're set. And she just had them respond with, there's a lot more to it than that. I think you need to speak to the China Success Coach. She got on the phone with the easiest sale in the world. These people were terrified to go. The organization was motivated to pay. She actually charged $30,000 for doing this, minus a $3,000 commission. She made $27,000 for the easiest sale in the world instead of hustling to sell $50 to $80 an hour, one-on-one coaching tuition in Mandarin. That's rapid growth. That comes from having what I call a unified message. So when we think about inheriting our goals, it's the same thing. We're inheriting this, I've got this functional skill. I have to put myself in the same box as everybody else because I studied this course or I do this thing. I'm like, absolutely not. Every single person has unique skills, talents, and past customers that allow them to help a demographic of people. And if they learn to message that by saying, what are they? Like Wendy, it was e-commerce, respect, and rapport. The higher level benefit of that was China Success. Then if you that's what you've got to do. What are the things I do outside the scope of my functional skill, and what is the high level benefit of that? If you can do that, that is scary because it pushes you outside the box of what other people tell you to do. But it's the same thing. Everyone will tell you that that's a crazy thing to do. Why would you not make it like somebody understands what you do? And well, think about networking. When you're in a networking room and somebody asks you what you do, I know the first time I said it, I said I was a sales trainer. And they looked at me like I was one step above a scam artist. And then I said I was in marketing. And they're like, I need that. How much do you cost? Or, I'm already working with someone in marketing. What am I supposed to say? I've got magic ruby slippers. The whole thing is awkward. And the elevator pitch doesn't work better. Asking someone a bunch of questions, that's ridiculous. No one wants to be interrogated. And saying you do a few things, even worse. So you've got to come up with a way of conveying what you do that doesn't put you in the box. It sounds scary, but getting out of the comfort zone of what you've been doing is where the magic happens.
Wow. So you also don't like that you said the death of the elevator pitch?
I can't stand the elevator pitch. I mean, that's partly the reason why I invented the elevator pitch. I invented this unified message. I remember the first time, as I said, when I told somebody that I was a sales trainer, it was actually, I was at my gym. I just moved to Austin. I was in an apartment complex and we were looking for a place to live. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go to the gym. I met this guy and turns out he owns a gym. For like 15 minutes, he told me all about his business. And he was like, what do you do? And I said, I'm a sales trainer. And he looked at me like horribly and told me all these reasons for why he hated sales trainers. And I started telling him about the 93 doors, the fact I learned a more authentic method. And I mean, I wasn't trying to sell to him. I felt like a sleazy salesperson. I was just trying to make a friend, but I felt on the defensive. And so I ruminated over that like crazy. Like I could always say, this is an external sales system. I can learn this. and I can perfect each piece. But I took this rejection personally. And then when I went to networking rooms and said I was in a marketing, that was even worse because then I was trying to avoid talking about the pricing. And so I was like, there needs to be something that exists that means that instead of feeling like I'm shoving something down somebody's throat, they're asking because they're generally interested. So that's where I came up with the rapid growth guy. And when I said that, a person's brain explodes because they're like, I don't know what box to put you in. And because I've been interested before I'm trying to be interesting, they are forced to ask, what exactly is that? Because they want to know and they feel like they want to give back. But I mean, for those people that have heard of the elevator pitch, it's I do this for this group of people, even if. And it just feels transactional. It's like, do you want to buy from me? What about you? What about you? And other people say, oh, I just go and talk about myself in general. And most people, that's what leads to a whole bunch of business cards, but no results. So what I'll do is I'll say, thanks for asking. I'm the rapid growth guy. And when people say, what exactly is that? I will then say, well, one of the things I love to see more than anything in the world is an amazing introverted service provider with enough talent, skill, and belief in themselves to start a business of their own. But what I find, and I just hate seeing this, is they get stuck in this endless hamster wheel of struggling to find interested people, trying to set themselves apart, trying to make the sale, really feeling like people only care about one thing, price. Do you know anyone like that? And when they're like, well, yeah, I'm like that, or of course they know someone, especially because I've done my homework beforehand. I've gone to the right networking event. I've connected with people in advance because you can do that these days. Technology is amazing, and there's lots of ways to do that. When they respond in the affirmative, I say, well, I'm on a mission to help people like yourself realize you really can have a rapid growth business doing what you love, just not by getting better at your functional skill. You're probably amazing at that. Instead, by focusing on just 3 things outside the scope of your functional skill that allow you to create a business that revolves around you, your family, and your life, not the other way around. Actually, let me give you an example, and then might tell them a more abbreviated story of Wendy. But what you'll probably notice from what I did, the elevator pitch is I. It's so braggy. This wasn't about me at all. It was about the change I want to see in the world, the people that I want to serve, the people I want to help. It doesn't feel as uncomfortable, which is why people love using it. And then the other thing you'll realize, I didn't actually even tell you what I do. And the reason for that is nobody cares what you do until they see that you care. So I convey care. And then in the story, I then share what it is that I do. Because in the story, what you would have noticed, and we've shared stories the whole way through today, is the first thing is it forces me to pick and choose which functional jargon. So it stops you spewing jargon out. And by the way, the true definition of sales is derived from the Scandinavian term to serve. And the best way to serve your customers is to get them out of their own way. So if you have a product and service that doesn't help them, stop selling it. There's better things to do with your life. But if you have a product or service that genuinely helps them, you owe it to them to get them out of their own way by getting them to tell you they're interested in a networking room or say yes in a sale. So for me, it restricts the amount of information, but more importantly, people remember up to 22 times more information when embedded into a story. So it makes it more tangible. It also activates the reticular activating system of a person's brain, which means while I'm telling you these stories, I'm creating artificial rapport with you, which introverts are great at creating into real rapport. For extroverts, it actually works better than small talk. And then it short circuits the logical brain, which is the part of the brain that's like, that'll work for me, that won't work for me. Hang up the phone, send me a proposal, and speaks directly to the emotional brain. Like the emotional brain goes, story time. It just assumes all the detail as fact, which is actually a duty of care. Only tell real stories, please. But when your story is real, then you're conveying somebody that you got a really great outcome for. And to them, they're like, wow, you could do that for me. So because of that, they're excited and they're motivated to work with you. So stories are great at doing all of those things, but giving people the opportunity to be motivated and inspired to take action while embedding yourself as the only logical choice without being salesy. And that's why when somebody says, I'm going to build a sales system, like, there's your big audacious goal. Forget about that. Let's micro step. Let's focus just on one story that you can tell and tell it well. And I don't mean a testimonial or a case study. Everyone thinks they're great storytellers. These stories, most people don't want to deliver because they come across as braggy and transactional. What you need to be looking for is a story that's far more like the story of how you met your spouse. It's this theatrical masterpiece that over time you've taken things out because people didn't like those elements as much. You've embellished on certain pieces to the point where you're saying one thing, they're saying the other, and you're like, so that's how we met. And people say, oh, but I don't do that in a business setting because I'm being mindful of somebody's time. I'm like, you're kidding me, right? You're going to hit them with a ton of jargon and not worry about that and make them read this whole proposal. Why not tell them a couple of minute story where they can actually see the effect, try it on and go, you know what? That fits me. As a matter of fact, half the reason why I people try on advice or refuse to try on that advice, or at least refuse to walk out with it and actually utilize it, is because they weren't able to try it on and see that it can help them.
And you also mentioned, in your talks that it's also they remember a lot of pieces. You had mentioned the Goldilocks story.
Yeah, so I mean that's actually an exercise that I do, and it's funny. Every now and then somebody realizes what I'm doing, but most of the time not. I'll be in an audience, and somebody will. I'll just pick somebody at random because I talk about 22 times being really hard to believe, and I'm like, I just pick somebody at random, and I'm like, you know what? Let's prove the point. What's your name? Bob? Okay, Bob. I'm gonna pick 3 items at random, and I act like I'm gonna make them up. And so the first one, I'm like, well, we're all sitting in chairs, so let's go with chairs. And this morning I had porridge for breakfast, so let's go with a good English breakfast porridge. And we all go to bed at night, or we just got out of bed, so bed. So I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for you. So we got those. Well, here's the deal. I don't want you to write them down, but a year from now, I'm going to call you when you're in the middle of something, and I'm going to ask you what those 3 items are in the order I told you. What are your chances? And they're like, everyone's like, oh, well, I don't think so. And I'm like, who here believes in Bob? And everybody will say, no, not really. And then I say, well, if I told you the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears, would that ring a bell? And they're like, straight away, instant recall. Why? Because people remember. And now all of a sudden, you know a whole bunch more context about those 3 items. I don't even need to tell you that. And then I say, well, when was the last time you heard that story? Now, if I'm going through a sale and there's multiple stakeholders, I want the person that is on my side to champion my work. And if they're like, well, here's a whole bunch of proposals with a whole bunch of jargon, but let me tell you about Goldilocks, because this is the one I think it's a little bit more pricey than the others, but I think we should go forward. But the truth is, I don't even need to worry about that, because usually, if you tell the story the right way at the very beginning, they're not even going to ask you to submit a proposal. They'll say, you know what, let's sidestep that. I was going to do collective decision making because I didn't want to take a risk, but my stories don't actually center on the company. The stories that I create are always about this person that took a risk on me. I held their hand through the whole process, and they got a promotion or a pay rise as a result of it. And therefore, they are like, you know what, forget about the collective decision making. I want all the credit for this. So because of that, a lot of times deals happen in far shorter sales cycles. And if you're selling to a small business owner, I mean, the truth is, I actually invented a sales method called the no small talk sales method, because in today's COVID environment, well, post COVID, the truth is people have got 30-minute Zoom sessions all the time. And if you're an extrovert trying to do 15 minutes of small talk, good luck with closing that deal. You're going to have multiple appointments. You're going to wonder why they didn't buy. So today's world, actually, this is the way you've probably heard this. I'm sure you've been on a sales call like this. So somebody will say to you, I'm so glad we can get on a call together. Tell me a little bit about your business. I mean, my response is always, sure, I'd love to. After checking out my website, what questions do you have? And you watch them fall apart because they've done their homework. Now, a lot of people have done their homework, but by asking that question, they then get this monologue, and the person resents it because they know that the person usually comes unprepared. So what I will do is I'll say, I'm so glad we can get on a call together today. Yes, me too. Well, obviously, I've taken a moment to look at the brief notes that you left on the reservation, or the notes for our networking. I've obviously checked out your website, your LinkedIn profile, because a lot of that is static, though, or because it's been a little while since you scheduled this call. What I'd love to do before we get started is take a quick step back, hear a little bit more about you, what you're struggling with, and how I can be the most help to you in the time we have together today. And then I just stop talking. And what you'll find is people will appreciate that so much, and then they'll go straight to telling you exactly what you need. And then your whole job is to just ask them one question or make one statement and then lead into a story. And at the end of the story, you say, does that make sense? And they're like, yes, for 2 reasons. One is that it does make sense, and the other is they don't want to hear another long story. And then the second they say that, you say, well, great, at this stage I can do 1 or 2 things. I can direct you to X, Y, and Z, or I can talk to you about working with me, or whatever that looks like. And a lot of times I'll say, I can talk to you about some great free content to continue down this path yourself, or I can talk to you about, my online program, and I'll let them select. And by doing that, they're saying, do I want to be sold to or do I not? And if they don't want to be sold to, they'll say the free content. Or if they haven't received enough value yet from you, they'll say the free content. The logical buyers, there's such a small percentage of these, surprisingly, they'll want to hear about the free content, and they're like, okay, now tell me about the online program. The other people, I promise you, they have no budget. So all these people you're spending time chasing, if you just tell them about the fact that there are free stuff, walk them through the free stuff, they'll go, and you now know they've got no money. The way you tell that is you say, and at the end of the explaining the free stuff, which I go into for about 3 to 4 to 5 minutes, I say, and I'll send that to you all at the end of today's call. Now, I could just leave it at that, and they'll always say, thank you very much. And you say, no problem. I could just leave it at that, Or I could talk to you about the online program or what working with me looks like or whatever your process is. And if they say, no, tell me about working with you or the online program, you know they've got a budget because no one is going to say, don't tell me about that if you give them 5 minutes worth of free value that they can walk away with, except for the people that have no money. And so what I find is when you follow this, it's called my lead with free framework. When you follow that lead with free, what you're getting rid of is all the wasted time buyers, while the logical buyers that didn't really connect as much with the story are now connecting with that. But the emotive buyers, which is most of us, go straight into, oh my gosh, I want what Wendy has, or I want what Derek has. How can you do that for me? And they go straight into, tell me about working with you, or tell me about your online program, or tell me about your widget. That means they're asking to be sold to. It makes it so much more simple.
Yeah, and you're also filtering out the people that you don't want. You said one of the biggest mistakes is that most entrepreneurs make is that they sell to everyone.
Well, I think that comes down to more specialization. Now, I could use the word niching, but I'm being careful. And the reason why I'm being careful is when most people hear the word niching, they're like, oh, niching absolutely works. Just not for me. My situation's different. And that's absolutely fear that's causing that. And I think the biggest driver around that is they're worried about losing customers. Like any customer's a good customer, especially the ones people that aren't making enough profit or have a lot of staff to pay for. And I say, well, let me ask you, where are you getting most of your clients right now from? And they're like, "Well, no, I get most of my clients from referrals and repeat business." I'm like, "Those people don't care if you put 'I'm a dentist now' on your website." Like, the truth is they're not checking your website as much as you think. But secondly, if they saw that you're a dentist and you're actually their accountant, they'll be like, "Hey, I noticed you're a dentist now. You can still do my books and accounting, right?" Like, they're not gonna care. Even referrals will be like, "Oh, I was referred by John. He said you're an accountant, but your website says you're a dentist. Can you help?" Like, you're not gonna lose anything. So that fear of missing out is really what the biggest thing is. But then the focal point that I have is a lot of people, when they talk about niching as well, they're like, "Oh, you've got to pick a segment." And I say, well, the truth is these days you can create a rapid growth business out of anything, but there's nothing worse than a rapid growth business with customers you don't like and a business you can't stand. So for me, I'm a big believer in making certain that people focus on their passion. And what happens is like, oh, but there's no money in my passion. I'm like, it's always the case until there is a way. Like for me, when I first told someone that the business I was going to start was helping introverted service providers, and I was only going to work with them on short-term engagements. The first person I spoke to about that, after I told them I was going to call myself the rapid growth guy, and they told me that sounds like a male enhancement drug, don't do that, was, what are you kidding? Small businesses don't have any money, and they're so hard to close, and they're so expensive to get a client from that you can't fire them as a client after I only work with people for 6 hours, and that's it. So it just doesn't make any sense. And I said, well, I'm going to find a way. And then I found a way. And it's funny, as soon as you say, I'm going to do it anyway, the answers occur to you and it becomes obvious and you end up making more profit. And I think that that's really important when you look at who you're going to go network to meet. Like a lot of people go to every networking event. I go to the right networking events. Like for me, like technology, finance, networking events, good markets for me. And truthfully, I don't even need to go to those events anymore. I'm in my networking book. I talk about the goal is to master the networking room so you never have to go back to one. But the truth is to do that, you have to be the clearest, not the loudest. And to be the clearest, you have to make sure you're speaking to a specific group. The interesting thing is I tell people all the time, if you say, I specialize with this group of people, not I work exclusively with this group of people, then you get to have your cake and eat it too. Because the people that are on one side that kind of say, well, if you say exclusive, they're like, oh, he can't work with. But if I say a specialize, what do we know about specialists? Well, we know a doctor, a general practitioner knows a bit of everything. We know a specialist tends to have done so well at the general practice, they get invited into a specialty. So we know they know more about that. But we also think they're smarter than most people about everything. So the number of people that say to me, look, I'm actually an extrovert, but I need a sales system. Can you help me with that? Or I've got a whole introverted team. Can you help me? The number of times, like I've spoken to like really extroverted groups, like people in property syndication and turnkey properties that are all really bulldog dogmatic people, but there are introverts in the audience and they bring me in and introduce me and I end up speaking at their events. The thing that's interesting is if speaking to everyone is speaking to no one, but if you focus on one demographic of people and you make everything about them, it's going to seem like you're cutting everybody else out. But what actually happens is your repeat clients, your referrals, they don't care. then the group that you do speak to see you as the only logical choice. So they're willing to pay you a premium. There's no doubt in their mind they're going to work with you. And even everybody else, they're like, oh my gosh. Think about what I said with the, I love to see this. I hate to see this. I'm on a mission to do this. I've never heard anything like that. Everyone I speak to is so transactional. I'm not in that person's niche. How do I get that person to care about me like he cares about them? And so what I hear all the time is these people saying, well, I'm not really in your niche, but I really would be interested in working with you because I feel that. Now they're trying to convince me to work with them as opposed to the other way around. So what I find is when you decide to specialize, you cut no one out. You actually get a group of people that see you as the only logical choice. And even everybody else that in theory you've cut out actually want to work with you as well. So the focal point is you shouldn't work with everyone. You should definitely you should even turn down clients, but you should at least choose whether you want to work with them. But if you focus all of your marketing towards one group of people, everything becomes easier. And it happens with brand new businesses. I worked with an MSP, which is a group that manages technology in offices, and they had no clients. Like his only connection to this niche was that his dad was an architect and he felt like he really liked construction. So he specialized in construction. And as soon as he said he specialized, people just assumed he must have been doing it for years. They never asked for testimonials because he's a specialist. So he moved into a brand new market, said he was a specialist. And the next thing you knew, he had all these construction clients that he would never have got without. And they're like, this is amazing. Nobody specializes in working with us. I mean, you found yourself a killer niche. But it doesn't need to be. People get this wrong and they focus on industry niche. It's got to be an industry. It's got to be an industry. So the counterpoint is you have what's called an outcome niche. I worked with a different MSP who was a multi-million-dollar business, but again, maxed out his Rolodex. And so what we did is I started to realize that there was lots of businesses that he'd worked with, but where he really did well was focusing on customers that had a growth through acquisition mindset. Usually the CEO that's hired for that their whole focus is buy businesses. But what happens is they keep their cards pretty close to their chest because they don't want the offer to get pushed up by another buyer. And so they don't let anyone know about it. And then the acquisition happens and they walk into the technology, the CTO, and they say, oh, we just bought this company. I need you to connect everything by next week. And the CTO is like, I just spent the last year building a moat around our organization. Now you want me to build a superhighway between these two interconnected offices? Are you kidding? There ends up licensing issues. There's lost productivity. There's customer service issues, data issues. It costs a fortune. So I said, well, really what you do, because if you have one bad acquisition that pushes all the cost up, and then it happens again, you lose stakeholder support towards acquisition. If you're a CEO that's only been hired for that, it's not a long time until you're out of work and you've been laid off and you're looking for another job and you've been replaced. So what we did is we created his unified message as the acquisition lifeguard, right? Helping people understand that he comes in and works with the CTO to translate to the boardroom. Because the reason why they don't want to invite the CTO in is, yeah, they're keeping it secret, but they also don't want all that jargon in the boardroom. So he trains the CTO to become somebody that can sit in the boardroom, even more important these days, but also helps the CEO become comfortable making sure that they've got a plan and even doing an assessment before the purchase has happened about what are the possible risks. So you don't need to have a industry niche. You can go for an outcome niche. And what I find is the best of them have both. I work with introverted service providers. That's my specialty. However, I have lots of extroverted product-based companies as clients, including organizations like Intel and Oracle that sell hardware. And yes, some of them sell software too, but the fact of the matter is these are mostly product-based companies. Yet they still hire me because enough introverted service providers loved my work. They started sharing it online, and somebody at Oracle read my book, saw my chapter on storytelling and said most storytelling initiatives take 8 months to operationalize and usually fail. Matt's only written a chapter on storytelling. I bet you his concepts are simpler. And they reached out and I was like, yeah, I can do it. I can show you live from stage that it can be done in 8 minutes. And I do that in every time I talk about storytelling. I believe that people need to see it can be done instantly and how different it can be. So I'll invite somebody up on stage and I'll transform their story live from stage. I wouldn't have had any of these opportunities unless I focused on introverted service providers. But yet I'm hired all the time by extroverted people and extroverted companies with products.
Like Oracle.
Like Oracle and so many others. It's crazy. And it always happens. Like somebody says to me, I'm so scared of losing clients. There's not enough people in this area. Actually, I was on it was like a bridge call with a whole bunch of EOers in Canada. And there was one guy in Canada that said, oh yeah, but it's different for me. I'm in construction and there's not enough restaurants that are built. I'd love to focus on restaurants. And I said, I'm confused. How many restaurants are built every year in your city? He's like, oh, only probably 100 or two. And I said, how many buildings do you build a year? And he's like, well, maybe 12 to 14. I'm like, so a good year for you, like a killer year next year would be 20. That sounds like it's like 10% more of that market, like of just restaurants. Like if you could do what, I mean, if there's 100, if there's 10, it's 20% of the market to get to 20. If it's 200, it's 10% of the market. Like, how would you not consider this as an option? In his head, he couldn't get that many. I'm like, if you're the only logical choice to this group and you talk about your speciality, first thing is, you're not going to lose any of the clients you already have. So what have you got to lose? And secondly, if you're going to get in front of somebody brand new and not fight on price, why would you not want them to see you as a specialist? Because for what you charge extra, you need to promise that, well, they need to believe that they're going to save in efficiency, the way it's built, the quality, all the things that you understand. I've got one person that's a building client that works on aged care facilities, and like they discovered halfway through the process, there are specific needs that they have, which I won't go into because that's their IP and they want to keep it under wraps. But there's specific needs that they wouldn't have discovered unless they focused on this. So now they bring that up in the sales, and it's never about price. Because the last thing you want to do is have somebody build something and you're like, oh, it doesn't have this thing and it doesn't have this thing that if you're dealing with aged care, you absolutely need. So there's just so many ways that once you decide you specialize, and this happens all the time as well, you're like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to make money. I'm going to double down. I'm going to specialize. Next thing you know, they've completely restructured their package like Wendy did to get to their ideal client. A good example actually was I worked with this client out of Chicago. She was hours out of Chicago, but she was a copywriter. And copywriting is like the most commoditized market in the world now, especially with AI. But she literally said to me, I can't get clients. Like I used to have four $2,500 subscriptions. Now I'm not even, I lost three of them. I've got one left and everyone wants me to tender for every gig. I'm doing micro projects. I've got to invoice. I've got to quote. It's a lot. And I said, okay, so let's look at what you do. And she'd only worked with a couple of these clients. But what I realized is she had this real passion for health tech. And I brought it up with her and she's like, I can't believe you saw that. I mean, I had a heart condition and I'm literally alive today because of life-saving technology and I've got this monitor on my phone. She was blown away at how much she loved them. And so it's like, that's where we need to focus. She's like, they're impossible to get in contact with. I said, well, let's imagine you did. What goes wrong with them? She's like, well, the reason why they don't like content is usually they try content, but they write to all their golf buddies and their investors. And so content doesn't work. So they spend money on ads and then they throw money into ads until the slot machine runs out and then they go broke. I said, well, what would you do differently? She said, well, I would help them realize that they have a avatar that they're not speaking to, help them realize who that is, help them realize that there are specific investors that they're talking to, and they should fix that. I'd audit their content, show them what changes to make, create a content tree for them, and then a distribution plan to get it in front of their ideal audience. I said, great, well, then you should do that. I mean, I was blown away at how much she knew. I said, what I would suggest you do is, and we created what we ended up calling a Trojan horse package. I call this type of packaging a Trojan horse package. It's a very short-term deliverable that lead to a long-term result. I said, so what we do is we create this really short-term intensive where you go in as an unbiased source, you audit their content, you help them realize this, you help them find their avatar, you build the content tree, and you create the distribution plan. You then create a scope of work, what needs to be done, and you create a suggested pricing for how much it costs to do it offshore, how much to do it in-house, and how much to do it locally. And then you hand them that. She's like, well, hang on a second, I want the client. I said, they're going to ask you to work with them. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, what I want you to do is just say it and deliver it. And I bet they'll say, can you work with me? If not, I'll give you a script for that. Well, the first person said, after she delivered it, here's the scope of work, here's the suggested pricing. He said, well, can't you just do it? And she responded, well, I thank you for asking. I mean, we love what you do and we'd be honored. The truth is we'd like to stay as unbiased as possible. And so we present this as so you can really take it away and work with anyone. But we do have an opening we have a small team so that we can stay the best of what we do. So why don't I, if you would like to work with us, we'd be delighted to, but the price for that's $10,000 a month. And the guy's like, sure, let's do it. Now, the second person didn't interrupt, and she said, look, we don't normally do this, but we just love what you do so much. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about health tech. We'd love to throw our hat in the ring for this one. The price is $10,000 a month. The client said, yeah, sure. This was a client that was making $2,500. Less than 6 months later, they were making $45,000. And then they were acquired by a big digital agency that was like, how are you getting into health tech? And the answer was she was miles away from any health tech company. She had to do it all online, but her message was clear. So instead of posting photos of a dog or donut, which is what most people do on social media, and I'm definitely never going to do, she was able to post clear content that tapped into her niche. She was able to directly outreach to them, not with spammy messages, but things that were absolutely on point. And she was able to get inquiries. And then, being unbiased, this was a totally different message. She wasn't selling them copywriting. She was selling them this, here's why it didn't work assessment. And because of that, she was able to charge for that and then upgrade them. And so we actually called her the mission maven. Then when she was acquired, she had a department of mission mavens. Well, she had a team of mission mavens. When she was acquired, she had a department of mission mavens. And now the golden handcuffs are gone. She's no longer part of that organization. But in a lot of ways, she still is the mission maven.
Oh my gosh, you keep everyone on the roll.
I think the biggest thing for me is helping people realize that they are unique. And there's a specific group of people that truthfully, a lot of people, like I work with a lot of people in insurance and like, well, insurance can help everyone. And I'm like, sure, insurance could help everybody. But just because it can doesn't mean you should help everyone with it. Firstly, there's no way you'll have this amount of knowledge equally for everyone. And secondly, you don't possibly care about everyone equally. So you owe it to yourself and you owe it to them to focus on the things you're best at. The reason you wouldn't is because you live in this scarcity mentality that there's not going to be enough clients. And what I find, and I know it sounds counterintuitive, is when you say, I'm only going to specialize in this group, specialize, not work exclusively with, then all of a sudden that group finds you much easier. They hire you. Price is no longer a problem. And then not only that, they then recommend you to people outside your niche, but they one-on-one explain why. So you get more referrals from people outside your niche because people say, oh, I don't want to work with one group all the time. Well, you don't get to because you get all these referrals from people outside your niche. And then your brand grows like wildfire. Next thing you know, you get random organizations that reach out to you that you don't even know what they do in industries you've never heard of saying, no, you must work with us.
The best of both worlds.
Exactly right. So you've got clients that you've got the clients that see you as the only logical choice, and then you get all these referrals to people that are introduced to you by people that already can explain your value. And then next thing you know, you get these random people that reach out to you from industries you've never heard of in places you've got no experience, saying, nope, we absolutely must work with you.
Oh my gosh. And you also speak to a lot of EO chapters. I think you've spoken to over 40 chapters, is right?
That's
Getting
correct.
ratings higher than a 9, which is really, really hard in our very determined, highly discriminating entrepreneur group. What are the best topics that you talk about or popular topics?
Yeah, absolutely. So my favorite one is, and actually I do a lot of member drives with EO as well, because I always look, and this is one of the things about caring about your clients. Like when I worked with EO, I said, well, okay, then if I'm going to do content and you want more members, why wouldn't we make the sessions a value-driven focused session for the pre-existing members? Why not put me at the end of the year or something like that so they all resign and make them feel like they got amazing content? But then why not invite external people and we'll make sure that they join as well? So I went, well, I can, instead of being a cost center, I can be a profit center. And so what I did is I started by doing a sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. And it's a blend of my Rapid Growth the Lazy Way presentation, which really helps people understand how to differentiate themselves, how to specialize, and then how to create a sales system and why sales systems are important. And then we actually go into storytelling and we focus on exactly how to tell the stories more effectively, the science behind it. I invite somebody up to transform their stories. And what I realized, because I only found out about EO a few years ago, and when I say I was upset to find out about EO, I'm not kidding, because I was like, I was really lonely when I was first starting. And every time I said to anyone in my family and friends that I was struggling with something, they keep telling me how lucky I was to have those problems. I'm like, I don't feel lucky. So I felt really isolated. And when I found out about EO, I found out there was a chapter in Melbourne, Australia. I'm like, how did I not know about this? And so for me, I'm forever soft selling EO from stage when I'm doing it. But then also what I find is when you invite people, they all hope to come to a networking event, meet a business owner that's turning over at least a couple of $100,000, maybe $1 million, and get an opportunity to talk about their business. So I talk about, and I do live coaching if I'm given a little bit longer in the first session. So because people always have an excuse for why niching won't work for them. So I break people past it live on stage, just showing people it's really not as hard as they think. And then in the second half, I will then invite somebody up on stage so they get the opportunity to see a story transformed in a very different way. But I get them to work with a partner, and just before they work with that partner, I say, "Who here is sitting next to someone they know?" And all the forum people are sitting next to each other, and all the people that are there testing it out are sitting next to each other. So they all move around, they share a story with their partner, they then see the story transformation, and then they come back and they work on the story after they learn the framework that I teach. And so this new member is like, "Well, I've just learned about this. I've seen live coaching. I've got this great content. And I've now shared my story with someone." And then at the end, I say, "But you actually have to take to action on this. So pull out your phone and schedule a time with your partner to make sure you're actually applying what you learn." And now they've got a scheduled call with an EOer in a month's time. How do you not join at that point? So what I've found is that, and I actually got my first perfect score with EO South Florida recently, but I've learned that I can combine great content, and with EO, it's more give me something that blows my mind for how to look at my business and market my business, and then give me something tangible that can make me more money tomorrow, with actually helping EO chapters grow their membership. I've worked with a regional to help at-risk chapters, add 10 new members and a bunch of EOAs, within just one presentation. I love doing that because for me, EO is a great network and I want to see them grow. And I think that they're the biggest hidden secret. So I really want to see them, get out and do more. But, funnily enough, I'm actually doing my first presentation for EO with this. I'm doing a member drive in the morning. And then for the people, and in the afternoon, I'm doing a second half of the day called Channel Your Superpower, which is all about getting them to agree on that one thing and then work with an accountability partner to get rid of shiny object syndrome, make sure the pain's worth the gain, and get out of their own way. And I've done this so many times for other organizations and other small business groups. I'm really excited about delivering that for EOs soon.
So, how can people find out more about what you do and connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so my publisher hates me when I say this, but you don't need to buy my books to get the content. I think that if you download the first chapter of my first book, I literally give you unequivocal evidence that introverts make the best salespeople. And then I break down the full 7 steps of the sale. And if you do nothing more than put what you currently say into those 7 steps, you'll realize quickly there's some things that don't fit. And you shouldn't be saying those to people. So take that out. You'll realize there's some things out of order, fix that, which is why you're getting asked about price too soon. And then you'll realize some gaping holes exist, which is usually fixing it with story and asking better questions, not questions, the right questions. Once you do that, you'll double your sales in the next 60 days. And you can also, I do a similar thing with networking. You can download the first chapter of the networking book at the Introverts Edge to Networking.com. The other thing is for people that just want to get a unified message and really discover their niche and willing to buy clients. I actually have a template you can access at matthewpollard.com/growth. And I always recommend get somebody else to listen to this episode and then you work with them and get them to work with you. Make sure they're not in your industry. I do this all the time at conferences. And at the end of the session, I say, put your hand up if you now believe you've got a unified message that will excite and inspire, and you have identified a niche of willing and wanting to buy clients. I'm like, the last event I spoke at, like 97% of the room put their hands up. Sounds great until I tell you the whole session was about 90 minutes long. I said, keep your hand up if this is the most time you spent on marketing since you started your business. And like 85% of the room kept their hands up. So the key is this works if you spend the time doing it. And, also, connect with me on LinkedIn. Make sure you say you listen to this podcast because I get so many people reach out. And if you do and you have a specific question, once I've accepted your connection, don't follow me, actually send through a connection request. You're welcome to follow me, but make sure you send a connection request because when I accept it, then you can actually send me an audio message. And you can do that on a on an Android phone or an iPhone. Can't do it on a PC. It's one of the best tools in the world right now to get clients that have ghosted you to reach back out to you because most people don't know this exists. So if you reach out with empathy, not, hey, what's happening with the deal? And say, hey, John, I haven't heard from you in a while and it's not like you. Don't worry about the deal. Just let me know that you're okay. You'll be blown away at how quickly they'll get back to you, mainly because they want to know how you did that. But we can utilize that tool. So if you connect with me, if you have a specific question about how this content relates to you, or maybe you've done the exercise and you're stuck on something, send me an audio message and I'll send you an audio message back. My goal is not that you listen to great content. It's that you get out of busy procrastination and you take action on it. So I don't want one question to stop you from doing that.
Awesome. And your podcast?
Oh, absolutely. My introvert, if you believe you can't do anything as an introvert, you'll get to actually, Brian Smith, I know he's a EO regular. He's been on there, and surprisingly, he learned how to speak from an extrovert. And he's like, that's not working for me, and then had to find his own authentic method. But he also, is an accountant that turned into a door-to-door salesperson with his sheepskin boots. So Ugg Boots is a great story on there. Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, the world's largest networking group in the world. Some really great talent that are all introverted, all sharing their own stories, and more importantly, inspiring you that you can. So yeah, definitely check out the Introverts Edge podcast. And if you are a fan of goal setting and actually setting more goals that are realistic, but also micro goals that you can slingshot into these much more audacious goals, then check out it's episode 17 on the Better Business Coach podcast. It's called Forget About Goals, Why is the Key to Success?
Thank you so much, Matthew. You've been such a joy to listen to and also learn from too.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.